All right, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. My name is Kelly Charles, and I am the NFDA Board Associate Director and the Learning Committee Chair. Welcome, everybody, to the Raw Material Challenges and Freight Issues panel discussion. We're sponsored today by Brighton Best, an NFDA Platinum sponsor, Jalen Franco, Fastener Systems, an NFDA Silver Premier Partner, Rotoclip, an NFDA Silver Premier Partner, Worth Industry North America, an NFDA Silver Premier Partner, Bay West Fastener, Copper State Nut and Bolt, Eurolink Fastener Supply Service, Field Fastener, IFE Americas, Midstate Bolt and Nut, Sems and Specials, Star Stainless, WTC IT Services, and Vertex Distribution. I would like to introduce our panelists for the day. We have Chris Donnell, National Sales Director with Scanwell Logistics International, who should be joining us shortly, and Michael Selman, who is a sales rep with Beta Steel, Beneke Wire, and Monarch Metals. I'd like to thank these two gentlemen for joining us today. I will be your moderator. During the event, everybody is going to be muted except for the panelists and myself. We would like you to use the chat box function for any questions you'd like to have presented. And since we have such a large group today, we are going to be leaving the attendees video off. So Jamie, do we have Chris? Or not quite yet? All right, so we will go ahead and start with Mr. Michael Selman.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. You can hear me okay?
Yep, perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Good afternoon, guys. I'd like to start with recognizing that today is Veterans Day. Thank you if you have served, if you have a family member or you know someone that has served in the military, thank you. I am retired from the U.S. Army, and it's always nice to hear thank you for your service. And I always give the same response. You guys are the reason why we do it. So thank you. When I was training soldiers, we always had a standard of excellence that we were trying to achieve. It's a one goal, one unit, one mission to accomplish something bigger than ourselves. I know that is kind of what we all are trying to achieve here today for our companies. So let's dive right in. Again, my name is Michael Selman, and I represent Beta Steel, Beneke Wire, and Monarch Metals in the various wire rod markets here in North America. We primarily supply the cold handling industry. The markets range from distribution, aerospace, ag, automotive, construction, military, energy, solar, a lot of markets that all of us are representing here today. I know a lot of you are already very familiar with scrap and cost analysis, and I'd like to share what we would look at and how we track our supply chain. We'll discuss carbon steel primarily, and then briefly discuss the stainless steel and non-ferrous markets. So let's start with carbon steel. Most of you will fall into the category of 80 or 90% of carbon steel being in your footprint of supply. The supply chain for first and second quarter and into 2022, we see is basically the same, meaning we feel that 2022 is going to mirror 2021 from an overall production standpoint. The processing of tons and overall manpower of the workforce is what we see are main issues that we're going to be dealing with for the next year. There is a tightness in the market with small diameter processing. It costs more money, and certain mills are shifting their focus to larger diameters or different grades or types of steel that are more profitable. The domestic steel market represents 100 million tons annually. Long products represent 6 million of those tons, and cold heading is 1.2 million of those tons. So our market that we're in is about 1% of the overall steel market is what the cold heading industry represents. I'd like to touch base on industrial quality or IQ market and kind of how this is related with our CHQ market. Most cold headers primarily use CHQ to make their product. The IQ market applications go into more of wire forming. They go into concrete pipe, mesh for roads, racking. A lot of this product comes from offshore. Since COVID and the port situations that we all have been experiencing, there is a restriction of supply of this and other products. So the domestic rod mills are seeing an increase on orders to support the U.S. manufacturing. Cold heading quality is usually more costly, and there is more of a chance of a quality rejection just due to the nature of what we do as a finished part. We are getting steels and rods, and it's just planning much further ahead in our supply chain. Processing is taking longer, and we have to adjust accordingly to meet various due dates. So what we're doing in return is we're asking our customers to forecast further so that we can meet their demands. Now, pricing for carbon for 2022, I know everybody wants to discuss this. In reality, we've seen an increase in every part of it. I know that all buyers want to have an index to track, but carbon steel is usually a per hundredweight price with surcharges that fluctuate monthly. So let's look at these scrap surcharges and kind of the market indicators that we look at. For scrap, there are three reservoirs of scrap. You have Russia, you have the US, and you have Great Britain. Russia has just made scrap a natural resource and is basically not exporting scrap to anyone. So the world's scrap is coming from the US and Great Britain. Turkey is the largest buyer of scrap, and they usually are selling to Africa and that region of the world. They are the ones that dictate the domestic pricing here. I'd also like to say a brief statement about green steel, okay, and the movement that we're seeing for all of us trying to reduce the carbon footprint by steel mills. Every industry is looking at it to be as green as possible. And for us, rod mills supply either an electric arc furnace that is primarily the scrap-based steel that we're talking about, or a BOF mill that comes from mining the earth. US is the leader for electric arc furnace and steel manufacturing. Now, scrap is comprised of the shred and the busheling. Shred goes into the IQ markets and busheling goes into the CHQ market. The CHQ market would generally follow the #1 Chicago busheling. Now, if you want to, you can go to my website or our website, betasteel.com. You click on the tab that's labeled scrap at the top, and you can find the history of scrap movements basically from 2012 to today, to the current month. That is updated every month. There's been an increase in various elements, manganese, silicon. Overall, it's up about 500%, all the elements, the extended elements. The manganese market is being controlled basically from China. A lot of these elements go into the EV and the battery market. And so most of that mining has already been bought. So when you look at the elements that make up the chemistry of the steel, all of those are up, whether it's aluminum, nickel, silicon, copper, manganese, etc. We do see freight as a major issue in transportation for 2022. There's a shortage of drivers that we see here in the United States, and this is not going to end anytime soon. It is a major issue that we're going to be facing, and it's going to affect all markets. So I'd like to talk about how does the recent lifting of the European Section 232 tariffs affect us in the CHQ market. The honest answer is we don't see a huge influence, and this is the reason why. The European Union is only about 2 million tons annually. This includes all of the steel. Before the tariffs, Europe was about maybe 2% of the CHQ market here in the US. Plus, we do not know what the quota system is going to break down to. When the quota system when this first came out with the tariffs, we saw this in South Korea. Some that came out as flat roll and bar and coil. We just do not know how that percentage is going to break down. But the bottom line is we simply do not feel that the lifting of the European Union 232 tariffs are going to have a significant impact on our cold heading market. So what does all this mean for carbon costs for 2022? All right. There's an increase on pricing and demand on processing. We have seen about a 30% increase on pricing from 2021 as we start January of 2022, and that is from every rod mill. The negotiations for this year were mainly on supply. It wasn't on pricing. So the answer is, can we get the tons? The answer is yes. It's just coming at a higher price. Cold heading quality is generally bought on yearly contracts, and the IQ material is basically bought on a spot basis. As we transition more into the stainless steel and non-ferrous market, let's talk about the domestic stainless issues that you're facing. We can get material from basically two mills domestically. One rod mill is in other markets, and they really do not have a high participation in the cold heading market in material. The other rod mill went into a force majeure earlier this year for not being able to produce the rod. So their input has been reduced by as much as 80% in the market. So we're all forced to use offshore rod in order to fill the domestic manufacturing needs. The overseas markets are having the same issues that we are. They're COVID-related workforce issues, people finding other professions, and retirement of the workforce. Freight and the time for delivery, we feel, are the major issues that we're going to have to deal with for 2022 when it comes to stainless and non-ferrous material. In the old days, it used to be about a 4-week delivery on the water. Today, that has doubled to 8 weeks. Ocean freight is still very volatile, and the holiday season is starting to tick back up. The ports are backed up and operating at a reduced staff. So overall lead time to a customer is about 14 to 16 weeks as a rule of thumb. The cost of a container have gone up significantly this year, and they will remain high going into 2022. Now, we all know about the elements of the chemistry, as I discussed before. Copper and nickel, they're up currently, but the driving force is going to be the freight cost. As far as the supply goes, we do have very good relationships with our mills. Mills takes about, today it's about 6 weeks to produce things from overseas, and then it ships. Then it's an 8-week delivery to our door. So overall, that's where you get the 14 weeks for. There are energy issues that we will experience over the next year. We really do not know the details of that yet. There is a global natural gas shortage that I'm sure we all are reading about. But as we're starting to hear this being addressed when we're going through our negotiations, there are not really any specifics, especially here in the United States, but we're talking about this from overseas coming into the United States for delivery. There is a copper and brass mill that has chosen not to support or be competitive in the U.S. market. So that's created a shortage and restriction of supply for this material. Lead times are into February right now if you placed an order. I'm sure everyone looks at the LME to try and gauge the pricing of the material. As most of you know, this does not accurately represent the pricing from the rod mills. The caveat that we all know about here is COVID. How is this going to supply into the supply chain? Vietnam was shut down for 6 weeks. Everyone was trying to rearrange shipping from all over the world. We were looking at every port to come into the U.S. to support supply. Some unknowns. Automotive industry. What timing is this going to kick off? The builds for 23, 24, and 25 show a lot. The fleet side of this is important to look at. It represents 20% of the automotive build. And the fleet side are your rental cars, military vehicles. That will have to be replaced. If automotive moves faster than we think, what does that do to the domestic steel market? The chip shortage is something that we all are aware of and are indicating a consistent supply into the third quarter, but it is going to be at a reduced capacity. This is very optimistic, and I would be very surprised that we will not be dealing with this and the fallout of the shortage of the chip shortage for possibly up to 5 years. Chips are mainly through distribution, so all companies are trying to figure out how to get chips consistently. Do they bypass the distribution to make their own plants? But whatever scenario it is, nothing is a short fix. We do hear discussions of inventory programs changing to as much as 4 months of inventory with automotive companies. So when you look at this, what are the positives to take away? Stay strong with your suppliers. The logistical paths are strained, but they're not truly broken. There are wire rods to be produced here in the market. There's not an increase of capacity, but still the overall tonnage is good. We all become better businessmen, men and women through this, learning how to do more with less resources at an incredible increase of cost. Everyone is looking at what they can to automate rather than having to rely solely on the workforce. So automation is being looked at in every area, and there are great ideas that are being developed and discussed for our industry. Planning is the key for any supply chain. It is a team accomplishment for this overall goal. Use your suppliers for current market knowledge. To close, just as I started this discussion, just like training soldiers, achieve excellence in whatever task you have. The great Aristotle said this: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. So let's all make excellence a habit for our companies. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. Chris, thank you for being here. We'll let you go ahead and get started.
Oh, I apologize for being a little late. I was having internet and connection issues. I don't know why. Can everyone see me? Perfect. I'm going to, real quick, just want to thank the NFDA and its members for allowing me to do this presentation for you. Although transportation is a hot topic today and I could talk all day about it, I just want to kind of cover some of the base information that is affecting the market today. Can everyone see my presentation?
there you go.
Perfect. Okay. I apologize. I'm actually on vacation, and trying to get this internet to work has been crazy. But again, thank you all. Topics I'm going to cover today: ocean rate comparison from 2020 to 2021. Cover some of the supply chain bottlenecks that everyone is seeing. I also want to cover some global and national and local news that is affecting the transportation market and logistics markets worldwide. And then kind of give you a forecast of what we expect to see in the transportation market for the next 3 to 6 months. Excuse me. The first one, what I want to talk about is for importers. Excuse me. There is a fallacy in the market where importers of large volume think that they're getting actually a better cost today, and that's simply not the case. There's actually 3 different types of costing that are in the market today. And the first one is your market or your base rates. Your second is premium. And then the third is the CIF market rate. And I'll kind of go into that and how they affect the market with this slide. Excuse me. But first, I'll cover the rates leading up to, and I took basically from January 1st of 2019. And you can see basically the rates up until about May of 2020 were pretty much flat. And I use Shanghai and Kaohsiung as a reference because those seem to be the 2 main ports for importation of this particular commodity. And then whereas the rates started to climb as of May, you'll see that they spike actually up until October 15th. We did see a significant rate decrease. Now, going back to the 3 types of rate structures that are out there in the market, I'll start with your base rate. This is basically what the ocean carriers go and base their cost figures for all MBOs that are in the market. Then, as the market started to change, they implemented what they called a premium service. And this started out as, oh, it's a guarantee to get you on the vessel. That wasn't the case. Basically, what it was to do is the space went to the highest bidder. And that premium service actually became, for most people, the norm. Then there's what they call a CIF origin market rate. And the CIF ocean market rate is basically your spot rates where suppliers are routing cargo. There is a cost difference between the 3, your base rate being the lowest, your premium being the second highest, and then your CIF origin market rates are considerably higher than that. I did do a base. So as an example, in October from Shanghai or Kaohsiung, October saw rates creep upwards of $10,000 to $12,000 for a 20-foot or for a 40-foot container. A 20-foot is 90% of a 40-foot container, so you can do the math. But at $10,000, the premium surcharge on that's going to be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 per container. The CIF market, if your suppliers are routing cargo, can add anywhere from, on top of that premium charge, another $2,000 to $5,000. There have been talks of importers, and I've seen references of this, where they're importing cargo to the United States in excess of $25,000 to $35,000, and those are the extreme cases. But that's the market that's out there, and those are just costs to the ports. I did not reference costs for IPI cargo or inland cargo because carriers right now are reluctant to move a great deal of inland cargo. And those pricing has skyrocketed. And actually, the IPI costs still remain very strong in the market, whereas the port-to-port rates are dropping. The next slide, or the next what I want to talk about, have the rates really gone up 500%? Yes, they have. And in some instances where we've seen rates go up as much as 1,000%, depending on where the origin and destination is. And just going back to my slide with the cost analysis, you can see basically the lowest cost that we had since January of 2019 was about $1,000 for a 40-foot container to the West Coast, and about $2,000 to the East Coast. That rate has since gone up, to the West Coast, you're talking $12,000 to $14,000. And to the East Coast, depending on where it's going to, we've seen costs as high as $20,000 per container. So if you do the math between, $1,000 to $14,000, $15,000, you're talking well over 1,000%. What to expect? What to expect in the next 3 to 6 months? Until 2021 or until the end of 2021, the rates for port-to-port cargo should remain relatively stable. You will see little spikes and valleys. Typically, what the ocean carriers are doing is they're raising the rates on the 1st of the month and then reducing them back to the normal level back on the 15th of the month. So you're seeing this yo-yo effect. Going into 2022, we are going to start seeing a surge in shipping as we lead into Chinese New Year, as well as many people aren't forecasting the Olympics and the impact that this will have on the market. Back in 2008, the surrounding areas around Shanghai, manufacturing was basically halted due to pollution. They wanted to clear the air out before the games started. China has already made announcements of some of the areas that will be impacted. So places like Beijing, Tianjin, more northern locations within China, they will see a drop in manufacturing, and that will hinder shipping. The pricing and the surge will remain strong until probably mid-March at the earliest. So importers should expect rates to remain extremely elevated up until that point. We may see a slight decrease March 15th, April 1st, as we head into the new contract year, which typically falls on May 1st. We also need to keep a close eye on the equipment the equipment shortages. They are taking place right now. We're seeing places like Ningbo, Yantian, Shanghai, Tianjin having issues with equipment. And I'll get more into the equipment issues and what's really causing that in a later slide. As with equipment shortages, it does give leverage to the ocean carriers to dictate the cost of the market, being a buyer's market. As for the ocean costs, again, you really need to kind of look and speak with your logistics provider, whoever that may be, and figure out which level and price structure that you're actually paying, because again, there are three. The base rate being the most sought after. It is also one of the least used in the market right now. Carriers are basically throwing out the window any type of an agreed pricing structure that prior to this contract season. Premium rates, which most of you should be seeing, those do fluctuate, and I have seen some as high as, again, $20,000 to $30,000. And then if you're allowing your suppliers to pick and choose the routings because they're able to get space, now you understand the reason why they're able to get space, because it becomes such a profit center for the ocean carriers. And again, the ocean carriers leading up to the pandemic were losing money, and now they're trying to make everything as quickly as much as they can at the current time. Global supply chain bottlenecks. Everyone's aware the growing escalation of ships anchored off the coast of multiple ports. This issue will not go away anytime soon. I know our current administration is looking into implementing new ways to speed up the recovery of containers off the boats, as well as getting them moved within the supply chain cycle. And I will cover those. Excuse me. The first one I do want to cover is the new container dwell excess charges that some of you may have heard. These were announced in late October. It went into effect November 1st, and the penalties and fees will start on November 15th. These fees basically are $100 a day based upon whether you're trucking or railing out of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. It is 9 days for if you're trucking out of the terminal in Long Beach and LA. and it's 6 days via rail. The ports are going to start charging the ocean carriers $100 a day compounding. So your first day would, after your, as example, if this was being railed inland, after 6 days, your seventh day would be $100. Your seventh or your eighth day would be $200. Your ninth day would be $300. So it does compound every day. And the ocean carriers have all announced that they will pass these charges on to the cargo owner. The FMC, which is the Federal Maritime Commission, as well as the Department of Transportation, are looking into this to see if these costs are actually viable, because in most ocean contracts today, those type of charges are not enforceable. So we're still waiting for the fallout of that. But as of Monday, these charges will kick in, and importers need to understand that. Also, the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach are incentivizing pulling containers after hours. They do have a TMF in place starting on December 1st, where it'll be $78.23 to pull a 20-foot container out of the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach during the hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you pull after hours or on weekends, there is no charge for that. So they're basically trying to incentivize people to pull cargo after hours, except containers after hours. These charges will not apply to transloads, as well as to containers for exports and empty returns. As going back to the container excess dwell fee, for those of you that ship LCL, you will also be subject to this, and how the cost will be distributed will be based upon the volume and tonnage that you have within that particular ocean carrier from your provider. So please keep a lookout for that. Going into air freight rates are dramatically on the rise. Since September, we've actually seen about a 30% increase in charges from the airlines. And this basically is from most locations throughout the Pacific Rim. Places like Singapore, where we have actually seen rates eclipse $22, $23 per kilo. In Shanghai right now, the average going price is anywhere from $14 to $19 a kilo, depending on the carrier that you're actually moving it on. And as most importers right now are so frustrated with the ocean market, they are shifting to the air freight market, and the airlines are seeing a massive surge in cargo bookings as of late. We're not sure exactly how the travel ban, the travel ban, and the relaxation of those for the 35 countries, and if more are to come, what type of impact that will have on the market. As today, most freighters are still grounded. So you have a lot of passenger airlines that are moving a tremendous amount of cargo right now. And as the passengers start to book and travel more and more often, it's taking a lot of space away from what that space that cargo can move. So it's pushing those rates even higher. So that's something we certainly got to look out for. COVID is still having a massive impact on multiple countries overseas. We've seen where airports such as Shanghai had to shut down for a period of time. You've got countries like Vietnam, Thailand, India, who are still being ravaged by the pandemic. And most of those countries, people are still working from home. So that is having a dramatic impact on the air market as well. As most airlines are now bypassing a lot of these countries and going to places where they can actually do some type of uplift and bring it to the United States. Rail terminals throughout the United States, it all starts with the ocean ports and their ability to load the rail. Most carriers do have on-dock rail facilities. However, with the lack of rail car capacity, slot cars, things of that nature, they are struggling. Right now, it's taking on average to get something to the Midwest about 7 to 12 days once it's placed onto a rail car. The wait time to get onto a rail car is anywhere from 10 to 18 days. So there are issues with that, especially with these new surcharges coming into place that we all need to take note of. Rail carriers such as the Union Pacific and the BNSF, both of the nation's largest rail carriers, they did announce in October that they have started to see a reduction in rail car bookings in upwards of 2%. It sounds like a small number, but if you can imagine the total number of rail cars that are moved on a weekly basis, that does equate to a lot of loads. The reason behind that reduction is not because the import volumes are slowing down. It's because the importers are now looking at different or alternative ways of moving their cargo. I'll go next into truck and equipment shortages. They are escalating, and something I want to go back to the dwell surcharges that are going to be happening in LA and Long Beach is the uses of chassis. As more and more people are reverting to alternate shipping modes to get their product to their final destination, they're utilizing a tremendous amount of chassis coming out of the West Coast for things like transloads and so forth. They're also keeping containers longer. And this is a kind of a double-edged sword because also the ports of Los Angeles and some of the terminals are refusing empty containers to be returned. So that's utilizing a lot of chassis that could be used in the market to be basically stuck in motion because they can't return the container to get offloaded from that chassis. So we will see issues with chassis as well as drivers, as well as trucks that are available to move containers through the LA Long Beach locations. We are seeing a massive issue with Seattle Tacoma ports right now. They are incredibly backlogged. They're much smaller ports than Los Angeles, Long Beach. The throughput is taking basically about 10 to 12 days to get something through the terminal, well, whether it's Terminal 30 or Terminal 5 in Seattle. It's basically taking 18 to 20 days to get something even put on the rail or even onto a truck. Transloading, through those locations or finding a trucker available in Seattle has become a logistics nightmare. The American Trucker Association has come out with their annual figures. They're basically stating that there are 80,000 drivers for over-the-road drivers short to handle the current surge. Overall, they're looking at roughly 1 million drivers short nationwide for over-the-road drayage, local and regional coverage. That's a tremendous amount of bodies that are not in seats right now that could potentially move these cargoes. They are aggressively looking to bring on, and they are heavily recruiting from colleges, trade schools, even high schools, and trying to bring people and new drivers to the market. They have since July brought in roughly almost 400,000 drivers. However, there's another impact that's hitting the U.S. market for truckers, and as more and more states legalize the use of marijuana, they're seeing more and more drivers losing their license due to drug use. So that is having an impact. Economists today are looking at 2026 as when they believe that they will have enough drivers to sustain the current rise in imports, as well as the domestic transportation backlog that we have now. I know 2026 is a long way away, but I know our administration is making demands that simply I don't think are feasible. But it's great that they're actually looking to invest heavily into this market because for such a long time, drivers have been such a critical part of our industry. And they've also been one of the longest standing industries where they've had such a shortage. Next is warehousing. And this pretty much goes from major metropolitan hubs. Right now, places like Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, Dallas, where available warehousing vacancy is less than 1%, which is unseen levels since I've been in the industry. CBRE, which is a huge leasing warehousing company, predicts that for every $1 billion spent in buying from overseas, as well as manufacturing here. They will need to add an additional 1 million square feet of warehouse space. And right now they're about 800 million square feet short of what they need to do to handle the current surge in demand. Costs for warehousing are skyrocketing. Cost per square foot is climbing exponentially. Cross-docking, transloading costs are all going up. And as more and more people fray away from waiting for the rail to move their cargoes, this is something to keep in mind, because as you look to transloading cargo, and which is kind of in normal times, pre-pandemic, transloading would never be thought of. However, the cost of transloading, as well as inland trucking, compared to shipping that ocean container from, say, Shanghai to Chicago, it's actually almost even. Actually, transload is coming in a little bit less. So again, look at alternative ways of shipping. National news, transportation unemployment is at 5.1% right now. That is higher than pre-pandemic levels, considerably higher. And it's actually higher than September. When in September we had a 4.8% national average. With the January vaccine mandates, there are two sides that we're hearing in the marketplace on what type of impact this will have. A lot of companies are forecasting that this should bring a lot more people back to work, whereas some are saying that they're going to lose a lot of employees because they're anti-vaxxers or they don't believe in that type of administrative power. We're still kind of gun shy on where we think the market will play, but going into this right now at a 5.1% unemployment rate, if it gets really any higher, that's just really going to slow down things. And we're talking, you look at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which are working anywhere from 75 to 80% of their actual labor force due to vaccines, sick, retirement, things of that nature. Having that number grow would just slow things down considerably. Another thing that we're looking out for is the price of oil. Oil is going up right now. Some economists are predicting that it could hit upwards of $100 to $110 per barrel, which is significant. Anytime that you have a surge in oil costs, obviously ocean costs go up, air costs go up because the price of fuel goes up. So importers need to look at that. The impact for a seasonable fuel cost to an ocean carrier is relatively small to the consumer, where they can see anywhere from $4 to $12 per container. But if the oil continues to surge, that could certainly go much higher. Our forecast for the next 3 to 6 months, ocean freight again, they should remain fairly steady for the next 2 months, leading into the new year, as well as through February and March. Rates should escalate, and we're predicting that they would return back to pre-October 15th levels. And that is due in large part to the Chinese New Year and Olympics, which coincidentally actually happened at the same time, the first week of February. For those that are not familiar with Chinese New Year, it's the largest pilgrimage on the planet. And it's not just within China, it affects everyone globally. Excuse me. Carriers right now are still bypassing multiple ports, your smaller ports within Southeast Asia, China, and focusing their efforts on your base ports, places like Yantian, Shanghai, as well as places like Taiwan. A lot of those other smaller ports are utilized by a feeder vessel, where a lot of carriers are basically bypassing because of equipment shortages. That will continue at least until March. Air freight will remain strong well into the new year. Rates will continue to escalate. We are in the golden quarter. Michael had mentioned, the holiday season. We are seeing massive bookings from companies such as Apple, HP, LG, which are utilizing about 70% of the capacity in the marketplace right now. for air freight. So that will, we may see a slight decrease come middle of December, as you know, that cargo cannot be placed on shelves at that point. But we are anticipating the rates to remain strong well until April of next year. Ports, air, and rail terminals. The ports, it remains to be seen what type of impact these new dwell fees will have on Los Angeles and Long Beach. Seattle and Tacoma have both said that they will follow suit. They haven't fully come out and said that they're going to apply the same type of measures that LA did, but they are seeing a reduction already with containers sitting at the port. As of October 1st, the average wait time at the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach was 13 days. Today, that average wait time is 9 days, and that is for rail. We're hoping that these measures, and again, that they're trying to incentivize to pull your containers out, or they're going to penalize you. We hope that they have an impact, because it will certainly benefit everybody. The ports will remain this way. For those on the East Coast, the Port of New York is wide open right now. There really is no backlog. Same thing with your smaller ports like Miami, Jacksonville. But if you look at the Port of Savannah right now, the Port of Savannah right now has a massive backlog of around 22 to 25 vessels that are currently sitting there. Those will transition to Charleston or Norfolk or Wilmington as carriers continue to sit there. But understand that the wait times going into those type of ports are going to increase. Airline terminals, something to keep in mind if you are utilizing air to expedite some of your product. The airline terminals in the United States basically have all come back and reduced their allocated free time, which typically is anywhere from 3 to 5 days to just 1 day. And that includes nights and weekends and holidays. So if your shipment arrives at 10 p.m., it goes into that CFS at 10 p.m. You have 2 hours to pull that container out, or they'll start charging you storage charges. We have seen some airline terminals, places in Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, and Houston, where that storage charge per day is upwards more than $1 per kilo. So if you have a $10,000 or 10,000 kilo shipment and it sits in a storage for a day, you now have storage costs in excess of $10,000. So we are seeing truckers that are sitting at airline terminals upwards of 8 to 12 hours. We've actually seen truckers arrive at the airline terminal at 6 in the morning, and then at 5 p.m. where the airline terminal shuts down, get kicked away and have to come back the next day. And there's really nothing an importer can do about it. Excuse me. The trucking market, we are going to continue to have issues with trucking, and this is something that we're all going to have to be cognizant of. One thing that did help the trucking industry is the vaccine mandate. Over-the-road drivers and things of that nature have been exempted from the vaccine mandate, which will help, because there was threats of a lot of truckers walking off if the mandate did stick. Warehousing will remain strong, and they're predicting 2023 that surge will last at least until 2023. Warehousing obviously is a contractual basis service. So most contracts today are in excess of lasting until 2023, 2024. In closing, I just want to thank again the members of the NFDA, as well as the NFDA, for allowing me to present these topics. I hope that I presented things that shed some light on the market, as well as gave you some ideas on how to utilize the market in your best interest, look at alternative ways of shipping, such as transloading and things of that nature. I guess I'll open this up to questions, or Kelly, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, you know what? Thank you very, very much. We are going to get to some questions. I've got a few in the chat. Feel free to use your chat to ask your questions. First one is from Michael. Traditionally, scrap has been an indicator of price in the carbon steel and nickel in the stainless steel arena. Is that still true, or what's really driving the bus these days?
Okay, so let's talk about the carbon steel first, okay? Scrap, yes, but let me clarify a couple of things with this. All right, what specifically goes into the steel price and what fluctuates monthly? Okay, so in the carbon steel, most of the time in the cold heading market, the rod mills, that price for the per hundredweight is negotiated on an annual basis. So that's usually locked in for the year. The things that change on a monthly basis are scrap, the elements like the silicon and manganese that I was talking about. Freight is a major issue that we've been talking about as well. And as well as what we put the material on, like the carriers, okay? All of those costs have gone up substantially. So you are right by saying the nickel on the stainless steel, that is still a driving force. But on the stainless steel side of the house, because of all the elements are up, but the fluctuation, the main thing that happens with the stainless steel market is really the one on the main thing is the freight. The freight increase has gone up astronomically. Okay, as Chris has said. So that's really the main. That's really the main two there.
Good, thank you. All right, and then this for Chris. And not sure how to say this name. Hapag Lloyd posted record profits for the first half of 2021. Are the container companies taking advantage of this alleged container shortage?
That's kind of a loaded question because we have large contracts with the ocean carriers. So
sure.
I will say this, that leading up until the pandemic, really up until March of 2020, the ocean carriers were working at a loss. They were. And they have made it very apparent that they want to make that money back that they have been losing for the past several years. There is an equipment shortage, whether it was contrived or not. I'm not going to answer that question.
Sure.
But my answer is yes. And I think most companies, if there was a shortage, they would act in a similar fashion, because it is, we are on a business to make money. And all carriers. I just saw one that is looking at a forecast. I think one carrier right now is predicted they're going to make $12 billion this year, which is the most profitable year ever. So yes, they are making money and they're taking advantage of the situation.
That's fair. And also for Chris, how are you advising your clients to handle the current China and Taiwan tension now and in the future?
I just put this out there. I work for a Chinese company. So we really are not, we're not steering people away from China. I think the tariffs right now are steering a lot of companies away from China into places. We are seeing a mass exodus out of China going to places like Vietnam, Thailand, India has been growing exponentially for us. We also have offices in Taiwan, and we have to kind of, I think it's a lot of chest bumping that's going on right now. I don't really think anything's going to happen. But again, I'm not on the forefront. I'm not Joe Biden by any stretch of the imagination. So.
All right. Another one for Chris. How does transloading work with ocean freight? I don't know if I quite understand the phrasing of that question.
I got it. Completely understand that. Right now, we're doing right around 300 or 400 containers a week in transloading. Transloading basically is we would take that container from the port, bring it to one of our CFS locations, break that container down, put it onto an over-the-road truck, and then ship that across country. The benefits to that obviously is a cost savings, especially if you're going into the Midwest where costs have escalated exponentially, where an average 20-foot container going into Chicago ranges anywhere from $17,000 to $22,000. We can do the whole transload process, ocean freight, as well as over the road for right around 20% cost savings. Another benefit to that is timing. If you're waiting for the rail to move this, you could be sitting there for a long time. And if your container gets placed into a stack, it could be months before your shipment moves. As well as another benefit is we're able to put Los Angeles and Long Beach basically have an appointment. You have to schedule an appointment to go in there to pull your container. With the new surcharges coming out, the Donnell surcharges, importers are going to have to understand that is going to fall into their laps. And by transloading, we're able to safeguard that somewhat, okay? Because we're able to pull out from the ports a lot quicker than the 9 days. So again, it's just another avenue to look at for an importer.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. Another one, Chris. This question says, no one wants to ship empty containers back to Asia. See an explanation for the container shortages. Is this true?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up there?
Okay. So no one wants to ship empty containers back to Asia. Seems like too simplistic an explanation for container shortages. Is this true?
This is, yes, it is very much true. The pre-pandemic, the average import, the import ratio was 3 to 1, 3 import containers to 1 container going out, whether that be an empty container or an export container. Today, that rate is over 8 to 1. And we are seeing where exports are being bypassed. There is a reason behind this. I don't know if it's a great reason, but I'll tell you what the reason is. The ports are so heavily congested right now, they can't take on containers into the ports to put on the vessels. And which is why a lot of the ports, Seattle, Tacoma, Los Angeles, where a lot of terminals are just flat out refusing to accept return containers. Mm-hmm. So it's right now, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But yes, to answer your question, that is true.
Okay. All right. And then, the current administration is talking about things that they're going to do to, help alleviate things. I mean, is there anything that really can be done short term by the government to free things up?
Is that for me or?
That is, well, yeah, that is for you.
Okay. To be honest with you, when Joe, I hate saying this because I'm not, not a political person, but when Joe went to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach and said, we're going to make them work 24 hours. We're going to have them do this. We're going to have them do that. Well, the ports were already working, excessive hours. Okay. And they only working with 70% of their labor force. They want to hire another 10 to 20,000 people to work at the ports. And that's great. But unfortunately, it takes a long time to teach these people how to do those type of services. You just can't stick a person up in a gantry crane and have them understand how to unload a vessel. I would say with what he's trying to do, it's going to take months upon months before we really see any type of impact. And I think it's going to be a year to 2 years before that infrastructure bill really kicks in because of all the bureaucratic tape that it's still has to go through.
Gotcha. All right. And then this one is from Michael. Allegedly, there's a global shortage of coil to make like number 12, number 14 screws. Is that true, or does that tie into what you had said about the mills focusing on larger diameter?
Right. I think it's twofold. Yes. Is there a real shortage of steel? I mean, they're producing at the capacity that they are right now. The rod mills, they're dictating what's coming out. So the one thing I did want to clarify, though, Kelly, about that, not this, but when I was talking about the European export for 232, okay, 2 million tons is what the exports were from the European Union prior to 232, okay, which represents 2% of the U.S. market over here, okay. The total EU market, okay, of course, is much bigger than that. I was just relaying that for the export market here. So
sure, that makes sense. And then one more for you, Michael. So how are steel companies deciding who gets product and who doesn't? And that's a very loaded question, I know.
Oh man!
And you can take the fifth. That's okay.
No, I think the proper way of saying this is that Beta Steel is a very large buyer in the cold heading market. Okay. You have to remember 1.2 million annual tons out of the 100 million tons, that's CHQ. So it's really small. So we have very, very good relationships with our rod mills. Sure. And, and it wasn't, the negotiations were not on pricing, like I said before. We've got the allocation of steel of what we asked for. Okay. So I think that's probably the proper way of me saying that. All right.
Okay. All right. One more for you, Michael. What percentage of your raw stock comes from overseas? And what steps are you putting into place to try to keep as much domestic as you can?
Sure.
Or is that
right? Oh, well, no. I think basically, the overseas market coming over here has never been very large as far as from a wire standpoint. When you talk about the overall consumption of steel, we are probably right now, I mean, at one time it was 0% right now with what we were dealing with because, the overseas market didn't want to come and sell into the United States. It wasn't attractive for them, couldn't get it, whatever. It's probably inside of that 10% range. Okay. Sometimes it can go in stages, on where guys come in and we have rod come in on a consistent basis each month. Okay. But North America, by far, not even a question for every different supplier. It's the largest percentage of what they're doing. So, sure. How about stainless? Stainless. Oh, so, all right. So the question was on stainless. If we flip the question and went to stainless with it, it's totally opposite. The other way around. Okay. Almost everybody is important globally for that.
All right. Well, we are caught up to all the questions in the chat. I'd like to, wait another minute to see if anything else pops in. But yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's really interesting to see these guys' perspective on it because they're living and breathing it every single day. So, all right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank Michael and Chris for doing this presentation today. Jamie is going to be sending out a survey via email. So you can give us some feedback on how today's presentation was, and for our future presentations, if there's any topics you'd like to have us address. We're looking forward to our next event, which is the NFDA CEO Roundtable next Wednesday, November 17th. It's a member-only event, but it is free, so do sign up for that. Also, be sure to join us for our virtual holiday celebration on December 9th. This event is also free and is a joint event between YFP and NFDA. The first 50 attendees that sign up will get a goodie box in the mail, so don't miss it. Again, thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you.